All right, so I'd like to just start by introducing our guests, and then Tiffany and I are going to more or less try to take turns going back and forth with questions. We would love to have audience participation and questions. If you have different views, if you didn't get something, please get Tiffany's eye or my eye. Allie, who's back there, will walk around with a microphone, so we'd love to have participation. So the first, I'm going to go starting to my left and going around the curve. Candace Gorham. Candace is a counselor with a master's in mental health counseling from Wake Forest University. She's a member of both the Clergy Project and the Secular Therapist Project, and she's the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, why some black women are walking out on religion and others should do so too, or others should too. This is a wonderful book. It leans on the lived experiences of a bunch of black women to give people inside and outside of that community a bird's eye view of how religion maybe is looking after religion in some ways, but not taking care of the individuals themselves. So Candace, thank you for coming. David Tamayo is the president of Hispanic American Freethinkers. He's the vice president of technology for a large aerospace engineering company in DC. He was the vice president of Reason Rally 2016. He's co-founder of Camp Quest Chesapeake. And David and I have been personal friends for about 2 to 3 years from our work together on Road to Reason, which is a public access TV show about religion, atheism, and critical thinking. So David, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next, Mandisa Thomas. Mandisa is the president and founder of Black Nonbelievers. She serves on the board of American Atheists and Reason Rally Coalition. She's previously served on the boards for Foundation Beyond Belief and the Secular Coalition of America. Mandisa is a highly sought-after national speaker with a number of large media appearances to her credit. CBS Sunday Morning, CNN.com, and Jet Magazine. She's featured in Candace's book, which is available for purchase at the end, so if you want to support the authors that come here, that would be wonderful. You get some good insights from reading that. Mandisa, along with a bunch of people on this stage, is trying to make it known that inside and outside the African American community, that there are indeed black non-believers, and that's actually a good thing. So Mandisa, thank you. Sylvio Lynch Jr., some of you may recognize him. He was here before on the Clergy Project program with Linda Lascola. Sylvio has a Master's of Divinity from the School of Theology, Virginia Union University. He served as interim chaplain at MCV VCU, as well as in the state penitentiary. Sylvio is a decorated veteran, and he served the community as a teacher throughout his career. He continues to help on the secular front by sharing his experiences with the Secular Student Alliance at VCU, which is where Sylvio and I first met. So Sylvio, thank you. Jason Callahan. Jason is a hospice chaplain endorsed by the American Humanist Association. He's the chaplain for the palliative care team at VCU. My wife, Rachel, who occasionally serves as attending on the palliative care unit, has been raving about him since they met, adding him to the long list of people that she might ought to have married instead of me. So you can talk to David. He's also on that long list. Jason is very open about his atheism at work, and he's working to increase the number of non-theistic chaplains in the area. And I'm really looking forward to doing some projects with Jason after this. And finally, Tiffany Green. Tiffany is an economist and an assistant professor in the Department of Health, Behavior, and Policy in the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine. She's the vice president of Richmond Reason and Naturalism Association. She's a humanist celebrant. And Tiffany has also been a member of Toastmasters International since 2010. And I asked her to moderate the panel with me today because I heard her give a wonderful talk on her own journey out of religion about 6 to 12 months ago. I thought she could bring some much richer perspective to our discussion. So thank all of you guys for being here. I think we want to just start by having each one of you maybe give a short 3 to 4 minute discussion of where you started, religiously, critical thinking-wise, how that changed where you are now. And so we'll just go in order this way, and Tiffany, I want you to do that one too. So, Candace?
I'll start here. My dad was Jehovah's Witness when I was really young, so we did that until my parents separated. Then I went to my dad's family church, which is the United Methodist. So I was confirmed in the United Methodist Church in middle school, did that. Then towards the end of high school, a family member got married and to a very charismatic, non-denominational type minister. So I got involved in that, and then that's when I was doing the speaking in tongues, fasting for weeks at a time, and casting out demons and all of that fun stuff. So we did that for a few years, and And then, I don't know, you know, it was always a lot of stuff that I always felt like the church was not doing a good job of taking care of like the basic everyday stuff. You know, like, okay, thanks for praying for my depression, you know, but are you gonna cancel me or, you know, whatever. And so really I did my own struggle with mental health, really sort of did push me in the direction of, you know, like I said, because I was depending on God and the Bible and Jesus and all of that to take care of everything. And so I started studying even more and more and more, you know, like, come on, God, like, give me the answers, what's going on. And as happens with so many people, the more you study, you kind of study yourself right on out the Bible. And that's pretty much what happened. It came on out of it after lots of research and study and all of that. Mm-hmm.
So I'm David Tamayo. For 42 years, I was extremely devout Catholic, come from a family that is very religious. And, but I was also pre-med, and I was very interested in science, and for the longest time I wanted to be a doctor until I discovered computers. And computers are very logical and all of that, but I was always taught that the methods of science and the methods of questioning things should be separate from the religious realm. It's a different magisteria. You shouldn't be, you know, the things of God you should never question. And so I never did. I started questioning a little bit when I became a Freemason, and the Catholic priest of the church that I used to go to, via internet, he didn't know who was talking to him, said, "You can't be a Freemason, the church doesn't allow it." And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, because we say so." And that was not, you know, too paternalistic. And so that was sort of I think the start. Then I shortly before that, I had married an atheist. And she is, when I asked her why she was an atheist, she says, "Well, because I think it's all BS." And I said, "Okay, but what else?" She says, "Nope, that's all I got." And so there wasn't much of a trying to convert, although my mom will argue the opposite, but you know, she never tried to convince me of anything. And it was only a few years later that in looking at science and looking at what the Catholic Church was claiming, such as the literal body and blood of Christ in church, that I realized, no, that's not true. And once you start questioning one thing, well, it's like a thread in a sweater, it just started falling apart. Realized that, am I the only Hispanic in the world that is, besides my wife, that is atheist? And so decided to start doing a few meetups and see if anyone would show up. And sure enough, after a while, people started showing up. And after having some good conversations there, we decided that this is something that was needed at the national level. So we created this nonprofit, Hispanic American Freethinkers, where we tackle not just the religious part. We called it Freethinkers because we want to make sure that we take care of all the other stuff that our culture, the baggage that we have with the culture, believe in magic and evil eye and all this other stuff, you know, superstitions. And so we wanted to attack all those things, not just any, you know, we wanted to be a reality-based organization, basically. So that's it.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'm Mandisa Thomas, and I'm the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. My story is a bit different. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. Okay. My story is a bit different. I was raised in what is called, or what is known as the conscious community. I was raised as a Black nationalist. I come from a single-parent household in New York City. And my mother decided that early on that me and my brothers would not be raised in church. And so I was brought up, raised and educated, and being acutely aware of issues that face Blacks. I learned a lot about Black history and culture growing up. And one of the things I learned early on was about how Christianity was forced during slavery, excuse me. And so in learning about the struggles that we face in our community, I knew that I would never be a Christian, but for a while I identified as spiritual. I first said I was an atheist when I was 14 years old. One of my classmates asked me, because I was very outspoken and very militant as a teenager. And so when I was asked, was I an atheist, I asked what that meant. And they told me that I didn't believe in heaven or hell. And so I said that sounds about right. But over the years, I identified as spiritual but not religious. I knew I wouldn't believe in Jesus. However, growing up or during my adult years, church was never really a part of I knew I always gave Christians and most religious folks a side eye because I've seen a very hypocritical side of them. But in later years, before Black Nonbelievers was founded, I really started to reassess my perspective on religion. And I actually had one of my mentors who was big on critical thinking, education. She actually had a problem with the fact that I identified as a non-believer and I didn't believe in God. Because somehow the Black church just played such a huge role in our community that how could I not? And so in her trying to discourage me from openly identifying, that led me to trying to find others, because there were still so many Blacks who openly identified as religious. And so in us founding, in me re-identifying as an atheist, which is still such a taboo word in not only society, but in the Black community, it became important for us to develop an organization that built support and community and to increase the visibility of openly identified Black atheists and non-believers. And like David's organization, we go beyond religion. We question any supernatural or thinking that isn't founded in evidence. And so that's where we are now.
Sylvio?
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Sylvio Lynch, and I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina, and I have to say that I came to be a free thinker, and if you want to say an unbeliever or atheist, that's okay. From a very young age, we attended Sunday school. I came up in the AME Zion Church, and in my household, no one ever prayed. There was never any formal religious activity or devotional attitude at all, but there was servicing given to the church. I think my first major experience in terms of being a rational thinker had to do with the idea of Santa Claus during Christmas. And I can't remember exactly what age it might have been, 6 or 7 years of age, and in our front room, my mother and others would put the toys behind the couch. And of course, when Christmas morning came, they would come out and it would be, as if Santa had brought them. So one particular Christmas, it all came to a head. And one day, my mother came home early, and my sister and I had been behind the couch, and the gifts were all out. And so I respect my mother so much for saying, rather than coming in and saying, "What are you doing? This is really crazy. Why have you done this?" She says, "Well, listen, let me explain this to you." And she explained the whole mythology behind it. And I thought right there at that moment that there's something strange about that baby Jesus story, too. And from that point on, I had a kind of skepticism that stayed with me a very long time. And I think to repress that over a period of time, I think it does have its side effects, like anything else that goes into your mind. And then over a period of time through Vietnam and having survived that, I had some real issues with that because I had seen a few chaplains in the Army, especially in the midst of combat, who didn't seem to be too brave. They just had this faith, but I couldn't figure out why they were so afraid. But at the same time, I moved through that. And then later on, I said, well, maybe what I need to do, maybe I've been called to ministry. I said, well, maybe I can get some of these answers resolved if I enrolled in seminary. Well, I found that to be very fascinating, one of the best educations I think anyone could ever receive here at School of Theology, Virginia Union. But more than anything else, as I had said before, one of the professors had said to me one day after a lesson, which I hadn't read as thoroughly as I should have, he said, "Sylvio, I want you to engage the material, read it." And from that point on, it kind of encouraged me to do some independent study. It took me an additional year to get through seminary because I was trying to work full-time at the same time. And it came to me that this was not something that I could take a vow of ordination for. After having been involved, I was in the AME Church, was going to become an elder. And after having discussed this with those men, I thought to myself, it would be very difficult for me to live with myself knowing that I would be preaching and saying things to people and saying things that I really didn't believe in myself. So the better way for me to be able to resolve this, I felt, was maybe I will put to work my own sense of commitment in terms of working in public education, work with young people, and I did that in dropout prevention and students in alternative ed in Henrico County, and not saying anything about my religious beliefs, but focusing more on the ability of not what to think, but how to think. Critical thinking, there are no classes in critical thinking in the secondary curriculum in Virginia public schools. So a lot of times, as we said before, so much time is spent on what people should think or what students should think, rather than teaching them how to think. And unfortunately, I think this has caused such a divide even in our nation, as you all have probably listened to the political situation. The persons say things that most of us know are absolutely not true. But at the same time, there are a number of persons in the community who are not going to take time to try to research it. So for me, being a free thinker is sort of taking me out of the box, so to speak, and I'm very happy about that, and I'm very proud to be a part of this presentation, and honored to be with these ladies and gentlemen right here, and young people, I admitted that. So thanks so much, and thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
I think it is now. My name is Jason Callahan. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm an exile who ended up here in Richmond after 30 years or so of exploring who I am and what I believe. In Cleveland, I was part of a family that was that lived in a community that was fairly diverse, not only racially, culturally, but also in its thinking. And in that neighborhood, there was a Presbyterian church that was really active in social justice. And this was the church of my grandmother, because she could actually walk there and the pastor wasn't trying to get in her pants. So this is the reason why she chose to go to that church. And in that church, when I was about 14 years old or so, I went through the confirmation process. I was baptized, and that was the point by which I started to understand that the church wasn't really interested in what I think and believe, but they wanted a young black man that also would speak the same language that they had, because it was going to increase their numbers, and that was problematic for me. So that started kind of just a journey where I then used science and used evidence-based systems to really challenge my thinking, but also I went into the churches and I would challenge other young people that were trying to buck the traditions of the parents or their grandparents. We fast forward through my career in advertising in New York City. I had the experience of taking care of my grandmother. She was dying from lung cancer at the time, and she ended up back in the hospital. So my dad, who had just experienced some of his own loss, asked me to come back home for a little bit, and I did. I took care of her. She received palliative care, and then she ended up passing away. But at the end of her life, she was sitting with a lot of questions, because the religion, the theology that she experienced, it wasn't easy to reconcile that with the experience she had at the end of her life. So that was the platform by which I chose to use to launch me out of advertising, and I moved down to Richmond to go to Union Presbyterian Seminary, because the pastor in the church that I grew up in, the Presbyterian Church, told me that Richmond is a good place to go down and train there. I did not know until I got down here that I was stepping back into what I felt was the Stone Age. The seminary experience was challenging for me, because I challenged the system and the way of thinking. I cannot explain to you how painful it is as a young black man, and you put the lyrics of a very popular hip-hop artist side by side with the book of Job, and you're able to show them that the community that they're talking about is the same one that you come from, yet and still your community is not accepted as part of this. So this caused me to want to move away from the church, period. I had come to accept the fact that I was not going to ever believe the same things, and I was fine with that, because I was also aware that other people weren't going to believe the same thing, yet they had positions of power in the church. However, that wasn't right for me. So at that point, I decided that I was going to focus on chaplaincy, because the role of the chaplain is to be beside someone regardless of their belief systems, regardless of what is happening in that person's life, in order to not just reconcile, but to really sit with the unknown, sit with the questions, and be a little more authentic in life. So I chose to go into chaplaincy. From there, my passion has turned a little bit. I have become aware that there are a lot of people that want to do good, but they don't want to live in the religious area, because religion does not own compassion. And that is why I chose to then really explore my beliefs further, become endorsed by the American Humanists Association as a chaplain. And now currently what I'm doing is working with a lot of other other individuals, whether they be interns or residents, who are coming through what we call clinical pastoral education in order to become a chaplain, but really want to be their authentic selves. There's a climate within those individuals where they say, I'm atheist, I'm agnostic, I'm non-believing, but I don't feel like I can do that because if I go out and say this about myself, I will not be able to do what I came here to do. So my job here is to then help others in that process to become fully board certified chaplains as well, in a nutshell.
Hopefully this one, yes, I like this. I am an atheist because of my pastor. Really, I'm an atheist because of my pastor, although he would die if he knew that I'm an atheist in part because of him. I think that growing up and as a post-enlightenment baby and wandering in church, mind you, things like, oh, how exactly did Joshua get the sun to stand still when the earth is, rotating? The earth is flat. How does that work? Or thinking about other scientific questions like, how did Jesus ascend through the sky? What about the atmosphere and the stratosphere? All those questions I had. But I think when it came down to it, I sort of ignored those questions a little bit. I actually was a youth minister as a kid, and I would get up and my pastor would support me. I would preach about things like atheism and party and talk about all kinds of things that interested me. But one day, the person that I loved most in the world died, my grandmother. And a lot of, I hate telling atheist story because they think, oh, that's it, that's why you're an atheist. That's not why I'm an atheist. I always have questions. But my pastor came by and I was angry. I said, you know, I was very judgmental, and I said, there are prostitutes and drug dealers on the street, and they're still alive. My grandmother, who would feed the garbage men, she would not feed Jehovah's Witnesses, but she would feed the garbage men that came by. She had a stroke, and she couldn't talk for a year before she died. And he came to my house, and I'll never forget what he said. He talked about his own mother dying, and he said, you know, she told me, son, God's will be done. And something in me broke fundamentally. I said, wait a second, God's will be done. That doesn't make sense. And I realized fundamentally that the process was random. It didn't make sense because there was no sense to make of this. And from that point on, from the time I was 12 years old, although I did not want to admit, obviously, that I was an atheist. And I struggled with that sometimes. For quite some time, and maybe we have a long discussion. I'll talk about some things that helped me, but one thing that was really like a light for me was John Sheldon Sloan's book. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy. It made me feel like there were people out there that understood. It made me realize that these questions I had about the Bible were being answered by theologians in the seminaries. And these were not controversial questions. This idea of the virgin birth was not controversial. So it was not a prophecy, and it's something that, you know, simple first entry exegesis class would teach you. And so that was an important set of lessons for me. And then going to college, I went to a historically black school in the South, as you can imagine, was quite religious. But then I had a religious professor who was ironically a former SDA pastor, the denomination that I grew up in, and that Ben Carson also is a part of. And he taught me so much about interpreting the text. And I grew to love the text again, and love it because I started to understand what the authors meant. And I started to understand the spirit of what they were trying to say, as it were. And at this point in my life, I am happy. I have a husband who supports me, who's also a non-believer. I have, I said that already,
You let me know if I have to edit anything out.
He's okay with that. I also have community. I have the RRA. I'm also a humanist celebrant, the American Humanist Association. So I'm working to be able to perform marriages, which I really enjoy. I got to a funeral. And a recent experience at Part 2 of Mandisa, I gave the invocation at the Founders Day breakfast last year, the first annual Founders Day breakfast at Norfolk State University. It was very interesting because I think it was first prayer breakfast until the Freedom of Religion Foundation got wind of this. And they said, ooh, we better get a humanist in there. And they said, But I feel that my humanism and having gone to HBCU allowed me to connect, and that's what I would like people to get today. Yes, we're all atheists, but at our core, we're still humans. We still love people. And religion is just one thing that we think about differently than a lot of people. But at our core, I think, is our humanism and our love for people and our love for rationality as a way to make the world better. And that's what I would say my journey has been thus far.
Well, great. All right, Tiffany, I'm going to give you a second to catch your breath. Candace, so Candace is one of several great Pitchstone publishing authors that's been here. So if you're ever interested in reading some secular, critical thinking-oriented books, take a look at Pitchstone Publishing. Can you tell us what has been the response in the broader secular community and also within the Black community to the book that you put out there? Has there been a lot of pushback? Has there been a lot of, thank goodness this is out there now and I'm not alone?
Primarily, yeah, it's been all great feedback, and a lot of the Black women especially, I'm always getting messages, it surprises me even all these years later. The book came out in 2012, and to still get, inbox messages from Facebook of like, oh my gosh, I found your book for the first time the other day, and I cried, and, thank goodness somebody told the story. Like, it really has connected really well. I get a lot of positive feedback from it. Periodically, once in a while, I'll get some comments on something somewhere, some kind of video or something where somebody says, oh God, you were hurt and that's why, and we're gonna pray for you. And so, but I haven't gotten like any death threats or anything. So I said I haven't arrived yet until I get a death threat. Like, come on. So I still got room to go.
I'm gonna edit that part out. No.
But no. It's been good. The reception has been great. So I'm very, very happy with that. Mm-hmm.
One thing I wondered is getting back to the human side. I've often thought about relationships, and I wondered from the panelists in general, can you talk a little bit about how being an atheist has affected your relationships, and if that matters, if you were a little bit newer in your journey versus now?
Don't all jump at once. So for me, it hasn't been that bad because I think with my wife, it probably improved our relationship better. I understood her better. She understood me. I think that helped in that sense. And not that that was an issue or anything before. She just made sure that, when I went to church, she didn't. She slept late on Sundays and I didn't. Maybe I was a little envious about that. I don't know. But with my family and among Hispanic families, family tends to come first in general. And so therefore, especially if they're Catholic, therefore, in my family, yes, there's a lot of pushback, a lot of trying to convert me back into the fold, but in general, it didn't affect my relationship. They'll still make a few jokes here and there, and of course, I have 1,000 to come back, 1,000 other jokes. But in the Hispanic community, the dynamic is a little bit different. When people come out to their families that they're no longer believers, they're afraid not for themselves. They're afraid for the pain that they're going to cause their grandmother or their mother and the people that they love. And so a lot of them stay in the closet just because they don't want to hurt somebody else, not so much because they're afraid for themselves. So in that sense, I think the relationships are a little bit different than from what I've heard in other religions, like in Islam or even some of the more hardcore religions like Mormons.
What was interesting for me is that, oh boy. Okay, is that better? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So what was interesting for me is that because I was raised a non-believer, I didn't have the issue of having to come out to my parents. My husband is also a non-believer. We raise our children to be free thinkers. My daughter identifies as an atheist, as well as a member of the LGBT community. And so what was interesting about my family is that I actually found out that there are a few of my cousins who are also atheists and agnostic. So they say that when I became more open and outspoken, that it encouraged them to come out more and be more vocal about their non-belief. I don't discuss it with my grandmother, who calls me periodically and says, you know, praise the Lord, you know, God is good and the Lord woke me up, so I'm blessed. And I'm like, oh boy, Grandma. So that can be quite a difficult discussion at times, but I've kind of gone in and out with my family and also some of my peers. They have come to, they've always respected me because they've always known I've been outspoken, that I have never hid my point of view. I was never going to hide that from anyone. So they've always respected me. And as we've been, what my atheism has allowed me to do, though, is, oh gosh, okay, cutting in and out. Okay, what it has allowed me to do, though, is re-examine how because I didn't necessarily come from, I do come from an abusive background in the midst of all of this. But what it has allowed me to do is to seek therapy and other forms of healing that were non-religiously based. And so I'm able to now critically assess how I process things, and also what I am, what I am putting across to others, what I'm conveying to others. And so that has actually helped my communication, not just with family and friends, but with other peers and such, as well as in my own household and how I raise my children. And so it really has strengthened the relationships that I've had on a personal level and professionally.
Well, I have to say, married 41 years, and my son and I think, are very much free thinkers. My wife and her family, they've been Baptists for many years. They're a very strong Baptist family, and I think that my relationship has no doubt sustained itself because I believe that my wife loves me. And but it was very difficult for them to understand why I had gone through seminary and had the training and had this knowledge, and why I wasn't going into ministry. And I think I was only asked maybe one time why, when I told them that I was not going to profess things that I didn't believe in. I haven't been asked anymore since then. And when there are gatherings and all, I think over a period of time you get to know that just don't ask Sylvio about certain things, because he's going to say to you exactly what he thinks. And I think it's a matter of respect, and I love her. She may listen to the sermons on television, and that's fine. But what I've learned, one thing that has taught me about being a free thinker is to be more forbearing and understanding. We all are not going to believe the same things, and each of us needs something in our lives to find peace. And we all don't find that in the same way. But I think the main thing it has taught me is to respect, because I realize that we all are not at the same place in some of these things. And it's obvious if you've been following the political situation and what's been broadcast to us, that we have some persons that are at a terrible intellectual disadvantage, and that it's much easier to believe something that doesn't make sense than something that does. That's what I've come to the conclusion. But I do think that it is not easy when you have family gatherings like at Thanksgiving, and they want to gather around and make a circle and pray. I don't have an issue with that. It's just I'm probably not going to be a part of it. And but I think in thinking about my son, I think out of respect for my wife, I think he simply is very quiet about it in his own way. But I believe that he's a free thinker also, and an academic, but a very good-hearted person. And that's all that I've ever wanted to teach her to be anyway, to be good and to be honest. Anything other than that is just added on, and I don't think it could be more of that. But I think I've done pretty well for 41 years. But I think it's a matter of respect, and I think it's a matter of forbearance, being able to endure and to be able to understand that we all are not the same. We all have different talents, we have different backgrounds, and before we start to condemn someone or say we don't like them or this group or that, it would be a lot better and more beneficial to find out something about them. And I think that's why there's so much emphasis today on the idea of fear. And what is that? One person puts it, false evidence appearing real. And until we do some research to find out about this personality, of what this person has been through before we start to talk about it, I think that makes a big difference. But it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think respect is a big issue for me.
So, Sylvia, can I chime in a little bit?
Yes, please.
On the respect?
Yes.
I believe in respecting people,
Yes.
but not respecting ideas.
Yes,
Because I think every idea, so I wanted to clarify that, every idea needs to stand on its own merit.
exactly.
And a lot of times when you question an idea, people take it personally, because a lot of religions, this is what they teach. You are the religion, and if someone questions your religion, they're questioning you, and you should be offended, and you should get all upset. And so that's often tough to differentiate sometimes for people. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's exactly right, and I feel what I've come to understand through that is, in many instances, that's all that person may have. And when that's all someone has and you attack that, it has to be personal. And you're exactly right about that. So these ideas are things that people have come to know and accept, have become a part of them, and not having had any questions asked about that, it's difficult to accept. You know, like, it's kind of like if you ask a question about a certain thing, how could you? How could you think that way? And so, but I think you're exactly right about that. So that's where the respect comes in. And so I know that if I were going to be combative with my wife, if she was sitting here right now, I know how that's going to turn out. That's a no-win situation. That's a no-win situation. And you don't, in my opinion, you don't have to fight a battle that's already been won. That's my personal feeling. You don't have to do that.
Well, that makes, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That makes me think about working my next project. You know, I'm working on like relationships, specifically like in the black families and the project started out as I wanted to look at like black romantic relationships and the struggles of being a non-believer and trying to connect and find a spouse or whatever. And what kicked it off was somebody on Facebook one time made a comment about, there's a black man, and he made a comment and said, you know, he was gonna have to consider dating outside his race. And he was like, I prefer to be with a black woman, but I can't find any black women that will accept me as an atheist male. So that kind of was like, wow, okay, let me turn this into, this got to be a book right here. So, so right now, so I've been working on it from that. So to your question about, you know, relationships and stuff, I mean, for me personally, I would say like my marriage and, you know, like family and stuff, becoming an atheist hands down, you know, made a big, huge difference. For one, because, you know, we were all like, you know, submission and, you know, women and men in this role and that's your role. So, you know, my husband, well, ex-husband now, was such a totally cool guy. Like, he's just not that type of person at all. So it was like pressure to him to feel like I got to figure out how to make this woman submit and be something that I'm not. And I'm over here like, okay, I got to figure out how to be what you need. And so when we were finally able to get rid of all of that, you know, crap, it was like, oh God, this is so much better. It doesn't feel better, I feel better. And then as far as like, you know, bigger relationships and stuff, it definitely has, I mean, I've lost some relationships for sure. And sometimes I don't even know I've lost them, you know, until, you know, later on down the line, I'm like, why so-and-so ain't talking to me
Until you don't see them in Facebook anymore.
Yeah, all of a sudden. Did you see me on Facebook the other day talking about that? No, okay. I was making a comment on Facebook the other day about how, have you ever had somebody that you thought was your friend and then they showed up as like a suggested friend? And so you like, wait, I thought we were already friends. So if you showing up as a suggestion, that means you deleted me. No, I want to be your friend. Anyway, but I'm looking forward to, my daughter's 12, and I'm really, really looking forward to raising a beautiful, free-thinking, atheist, you know, teenage daughter who's going to be confident in herself and her body and her whatever, you know. So I'm kind of excited. I'm looking forward to that. So as far as relationships and interactions and stuff, and the humanism piece is a big, you know, it's a big part. You know, being able to be less judgmental of others and just sort of accepting stuff. I would say for me personally, I feel like I'm a better person embracing the humanist side. And the raggedy relationships around that have fallen off on their own, and, you know.
So, you know, relationships is kind of a mixed bag because there's so many different layers to relationships. And speaking specifically in regards to romantic relationship, you know, I have experienced, you know, in my coming out, I guess you'd say, you know, a little bit of struggle in there because the community that I was in You spent so much time within that community that the only way you would be able to access many areas of life was to continue in that community. And when that community is based upon a theological belief system, it can kind of shatter your world when you say, oh, by the way, I don't believe this. You know, so in the past, I've been through that. You know, I've had the friendships that have been lost. I've had the mentorship relationships that have disappeared. I've had the people that don't know me, but as a black man, I represent something to them. And then when you add this little extra piece in there, by the way, it makes you a little more threatening. So I've had all of that stuff, but at the same time, it's a freeing kind of thing because it also is like gravity. It sucks in the people that are like-minded or know you beyond just what you appear to be or who you work for, what things they see you involved in. So it kind of has been healing in other relationships because then it just affirms that you, in fact, are a whole person, someone that doesn't have to necessarily fit some stereotype or believe the same thing that I believe just to be valid. And so for me, the relationship that has not suffered is the relationship with myself. And I think that has then enabled me to have better relationships with other people because I've chosen to do this.
All right, this is mostly for Mandisa and David, and then anybody else can jump in if you'd like. So Americans tend to be a little bit provincial and short-term or short memories. Can you guys each go back in your respective communities and explain, you know, how African Americans and Hispanic communities, what would you like a mainstream audience to understand better about the history of their place in America now and how religiosity became such a big element in those communities?
Well, I'll start. Last night, I overheard the conversation about the historic Black freethinkers and humanists who have been identified in our community. That aspect of Black history has been overshadowed by the legacy of the church or by the presence of the Black church, that many in our communities are losing that perspective of the diversity within our own community. We have had the presence of freethinkers like Langston Hughes, like A. Philip Randolph, like Hubert Henry Harrison, who was dubbed the Black Socrates. You also have a number of leaders and activists who have challenged religion over the years, as well as a number of entertainers and writers. Zora Neale Hurston, for example. Butterfly McQueen, for example, who Freedom for Religion uses quite often. And so now there is now a growing presence of more of us who are challenging religion and the ideas and the God concept. And so what the church has, what needs to be understood is that the history of Blacks in this country does not begin and end with the church. It does not begin and end with slavery. And it needs to be understood that though they do go, like I said in a previous in an interview, yes, the church provided a stable foundation of support within the community. We also cannot forget how it was given to us. It wasn't given to us in a good way. It was either you accepted it or you died. And so this piece of history needs to be understood within our community. And our people need to understand that you have every right as a person to reevaluate and reassess, and if it isn't working for you, it is okay to let it go. That it is not encoded in our DNA as Blacks that we have to be religious, that atheism is not this alien thing to us. I had one woman tell me that I had a slave mentality and that she could not believe that me as a Black woman I had the nerve, the audacity to identify as an atheist. And also that it isn't just a white thing. It isn't only white folks who are atheists or non-believers, again, historically and currently. And so the more our community, but unfortunately, many of our leaders still tout that, they still tout that religious identity. Oh, you know, I'm proud to serve God. You know, Tiffany mentioned Ben Carson, for example, who is just an unfortunate example of an educated fool. He has become that example of an educated fool. And there are many in our community who they are holding on to this identity with the church, like Sylvio said, out of fear, and also out of status. And it needs to be understood that while we do have beliefs, while we all don't agree on everything, it is okay for us not to agree on everything as a community. We never have, and we never will, but we can work together as a result, and we can work on re-identifying and re-establishing that diversity that has already been present in our community.
So with Hispanics, a lot of you might think that Hispanics are just this group of illegal immigrants that just crawl through Mexico over here. I know that a lot of certain political parties feel that way. Well, it turns out Hispanics actually, and I'll use the term Hispanic and Latino interchangeably, even though they don't mean exactly the same, but just for sakes of argument. So Hispanic or Latino is not a race, it's an ethnicity. And Native Americans are the same, have basically the same DNA as Native Guatemalans. You know, Latinos have lived in the continental United States since the 1500s, and you know, even before the English arrived in 1609. And in fact, in 1775, a year before our independence here, there were Spanish ships in Alaska trying to conquer that area. And in 1783, 8 years after the United States was the United States, Spain held claim to more than half of what today is the continental United States. That's a big chunk of land. So, you know, Hispanics and Latinos have been around for a few days, not to say a few centuries. Although that's not how we see it today, they've been a minority. Hispanics make up 18% of the population today. Just to put it in perspective, African Americans are 13% of the population. And, but we're much more fragmented, I believe. There is it's a very young population. Half of the Hispanics in the United States are millennials. So the median age for Hispanics is 27 years old versus the general population of 37 years. So that has, it's having an impact on the religiosity of people. But if any of you are thinking in running for office in the future, just want you to know that 73,000 Hispanics turned 18 every month. Okay, and that's 2,433 per day. So that's a lot of people, and it's a changing dynamic. The largest minority group today, the Hispanics, were not 16 years ago in 2000, for instance. So it's we're a loving people, and you know, we apparently don't believe too much in contraception. So there's a big growth in the population, although we have to admit it's decreased. Now, if I were to ask anybody in the street, Catholic, what's the religion? 80% of people say it's Catholics, and 80% of the Hispanics are Catholics. Not in the U.S. Actually, not in Latin America anymore, but in the U.S., only 52%. That's barely over half, which means that the other 48% are not Catholic. So the Catholic Church has lost a lot of people in the United States that are Catholic. Now, their numbers are still rising. The number of Catholics in the United States is still rising because the population keeps growing. And so even though there are a lot of them leaving the church, the numbers that are there are still growing. And so the Catholic Church, right now, it's about 33% Catholic. 33% Hispanic. So what this all means is that if we have all these folks, well, one last statistics. The U.S. Census says that by 2060, about 1/3 of the people in the United States will be of Hispanic descent. So if we don't worry about these folks, these Hispanics, being good thinkers, about believing in science-based medicine instead of homeopathy and magic, if we don't care about education and that kind of stuff, then we all live together, we all live in a community, we all get screwed. You know, if someone is giving you medicine, you want to make sure they give you the right, you know, the good medicine and not bad stuff. So for us in Hispanic American Free Thinkers, that's our goal. It's to change not just the thinking, and it will have an impact on culture. And sometimes people say, oh, it's okay to change religions, but don't attack the culture. Cultures are just ideas like anything else. And like any idea, they need to be questioned if they're bad ideas. And so, yeah, if you like chocolate ice cream versus vanilla, no big deal. If you like salsa music versus, rock and roll, no big deal. But there are certain aspects of it, and religion is very embedded into the fabric of the culture. So it matters to all of us because of that, because, we don't live in a vacuum. We all live in a country where we need engineers and we need scientists and we need all these folks. And right now, Hispanics are not going to college. The ones that are going to college are dropping out. A very small percentage are finishing four-year school, so a four-year college. And so that is going to have an impact if a third of our population is not getting the proper education for a future. It says a lot about the future of our country here.
So my question is more for Jason and Sylvia. Both of you went through a rigorous seminary program. I'm curious about the pipeline of people that you're seeing for both of you. What was your experience with figuring out whether there were other African American free thinkers in your seminary program, and probably some of them were closeted? And Jason, I know that you're training future chaplains now. What has been your experience with the pipeline of African American future chaplains? And how have you tried to be open and honest, and how's that influenced their ability to come out to you and be open and honest with you about what their beliefs are?
That's a loaded question right there. So the reality about how most blacks end up going to seminary is because they have a very personal relationship with the pastor or somebody gets them to go to seminary. Either they've been raised from the time they were young to say, you're going to be the pastor, let's get in line, because, theological education is not just something you jump into. I mean, it's something that people put off for a while, but they've had that feeling, but something has always been in there pushing them. It's very difficult as a black person to challenge that, because theology and just the church has always been so big in the black community that when you go into the seminary, and naturally in seminaries, I mean, they want you to question. It's not just a belief system, but it is a system of questioning and answering and coming to conclusions that you have to learn how to do. And unfortunately, a lot of times in the black community, we just don't have the proper support to do that in an authentic way, because we're still expected to then go out and then pursue what has already been in place and continue the kinds of things that have been going on forever. And when you do come out, you pretty much have no support. So in talking to other students, I'm very open about my atheism. As soon as a student comes around, I let them know. The first thing I tell them is, I'm an atheist. That's something you have to know about me. And then you're going to have to figure out why you're more drawn to me than you are those other folks. And that's just the reality of it. I think that when you represent just the most authentic version of yourself, somebody that's compassionate, somebody that actually wants to do something real, it makes it very easy for others to then gravitate towards that. However, you still got to go outside, and the reality is it's not easy to get a job as a chaplain. You have to jump through so many hoops, and you have to do it in a way that keeps you aligned within some religious community, so it's almost, there are almost zero ways for you to get in there. So a lot of times you just won't hear them talking about it. They won't bring up the fact that they feel a certain way, and they'll just continue on, and then people end up walking away. At least that's been the experience that I have. Now, supporting students moving forward, I do see a slight shift, because this millennial generation, they don't do things the way folks used to do back then. Because they have access, and the internet has you just have so much access to different ways of thinking, and they naturally challenge things because the world that they experience, it doesn't equal what people are telling them about it. They're stepping away more and more, which is why you see the numbers in the seminaries kind of going down, but the numbers in people that actually want to get into more chaplain type work, they find other avenues to get into it.
I think for me, recalling my experience, much of the thinking and experience with others who were there, many of the discussions I had took place more outside of class than in class. And in that way, I think you really sometimes get to know about where and how others may be thinking. I think for me personally, one of the issues with the Christian aspect was the idea of the communion. And I could not disassociate the idea of drinking blood and eating flesh from cannibalism. And having grown up and looked at many movies and seen Bela Lugosi as Dracula drinking blood, I could not see that as a positive attribute in terms of me being optimistic about a future. This didn't look good. And to celebrate this, the other part about it was intellectually, we would talk about this out of class, to intellectualize the idea and raising up a capital punishment as a divine attribute just didn't seem right. And then, because if you have an annual event, which called Easter, which was created outside, as most of our scholars know, a holiday outside of the church, not mentioned in the Bible, but for the benefit of the church, you think about things that do not make sense, and sometimes you talk about these things out of class. On the millennial point that you was just making, I think that's very good. There's so much new literature about new ways of thinking, new age, which I do have a great deal of respect for, but there's so much of the older literature that has not been really examined, and we were talking about this last night in terms of reading, like Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. And it's not likely you're going to get that in high school or maybe visit that in college. But the point I'm making is the foundational aspects of how to think are so much critically neglected. And we wonder, well, why are our students like this, or why this? But there's so little aspect given to that. And if you go to the internet and look at the Virginia State curriculum, the Virginia Department of Education, and look at what students are learning grades 9 through 12, and of course pre-K up through the 6th grade, you're not going to see a class in critical thinking. That's not going to be there. So someone should be asking, why aren't our students being taught how and the fundamentals of critical thinking? Now, you'll have various aspects of a test, for example. I'm a little off the point here, but my point is, how we think has to do with how we arrive at certain conclusions. And those things that go into our mind are just like the medications we get from CVS, except on the medications, if where religion is concerned, you go to CVS, they say, this might have side effects. It might make you drowsy if you take this medication. But when we take into our heads certain philosophies and ideas from theology, nobody says, you know, this might make you a little crazy down the line here. You know, something can happen here and you can't explain, and you want to know, you want to find someone. And then we sometimes, and as much as I love the history of the African American church, I think coming to grips with the fact and being able to discern whether it's time to go to the altar or go see a psychiatrist is a real problem. And when those kind of issues are dealt with, maybe not exclusive to the African American community, but in general, the idea of facing that there are mental health problems that cannot be resolved through theological strategies is something I think the general religious community has to come to grips with. And one of the better examples of that is some of the misgivings of the theology involved with ISIS. It's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy on the basis of what they are presenting in terms of using what they call religion as an excuse to kill people. It's psychopathic. It's mental. So when we talk about it, and I don't mean to go on about this, but the mental health aspects of what we take into our minds in terms of our belief has to do with how we treat others, how we see people, our empathy. You know, what is it we feel for others? We don't want to be tolerated. Who wants to be tolerated? That means to put up with. And so I guess I say, thinking about seminary and the kind of experiences, some of the better discussions I ever had were those that took place outside of the classroom. Gin and tonic. Okay.
Well, I want to mention something
yes.
related to that, and I think it's really important because we have some folks here that work in that field, but
yes.
I've had relatives, and a very specific aunt of mine is very sad because she's had, over the years, serious, terrible marital problems.
Yes.
And she refuses to go to a marriage counselor, but she will go to the priest, and a guy who by all accounts is a virgin person who's never had a relationship, supposedly, yes. For solutions, and of course, things don't work out. It's this thing that they have the authority of God, and so part of what I dislike about religion is that it teaches that authority is a good thing, and accepting things by authority is good. So when they read that little thing in there, and it's a homeopathic medicine, and it says no active ingredient, it doesn't click that this means it has no medicine. It's got nothing in it. And so this is the kind of thing that people get hurt with that, because they start treating cancer with homeopathy, and they're dying. And so this is, at every level. It's God trying to tell us something. So what I tell people is, there isn't anything that you can do with religion and churches that you can't do without them. And so, it's people that ultimately does things. And so critical thinking, teaching philosophy in schools, which in other countries they do, they teach philosophy. All of those things are, the Socratic method, just having them arrive at the answers by asking questions. Those are the kinds of things that are very important. And in Hispanic American Freethinkers, we have a program in Northern Virginia, in the Fairfax schools, and we've extended it a little bit to Maryland and some other counties, where we go to the high schools to do presentations on critical thinking skills. And kids have a lot of fun, because there's a lot of ways you can do that. I've heard people say, well, I have to see it to believe it. And it's like, no, if you see something, you don't have to believe it, actually. I mean, that's what a magic show is all about. You see something that is not real. And so we bring some magic tricks to show the kids. We show them, all the different fallacies that we can all fall into because we're human, and that are sort of natural to our biology. And get them to think and question absolutely everything. Questioning, our slogan with the kids in school is, question everything, because the truth is not afraid to be questioned. In fact, the truth, it welcomes question and wants to be questioned. So bring it on.
I'd like to add one other observation here also. I had begun to look at the history of what is called atheism, and some historians put this word at a particular point in time, but the appropriate, in my opinion, way of looking at this is unbelief. Now, when you look at unbelief, it is that thing which belief came out of. When you look at ancient history, for an example, like when I think it's the 13th or 14th century BC, the Pharaoh Akhenaten was the one they accredit the idea of one God, monotheism. Okay, but if you look back even further, say to about 3,500 BC, when the Africans united the northern and southern kingdoms through Norma, or Men's his name is, during that time period, there was no such thing as religion really whatsoever. So the real question is, on a timeline, how do we get what we have? And this is what I meant by saying that if you take some kind of narcotic or some kind of medication, what the results might be. So when does it come into man's history? So I guess the point I want to make is, there has always been unbelief. And the way we prove that is, there have always been people put to death for not going along with the group. That's happening right now in Saudi Arabia. It's illegal to be an atheist. And in many African country and tribal circumstances, you must believe as a group does, or you'll be put to death. So unbelief has been with us just as long, if not longer, than belief. I'm just thinking about this in a broader sense, because we generally think in terms of things being cut and dry. The Greeks in their mythology, I think I'm correct on this, check me, said, well, Zeus is on Mount Olympus, but the penalty for going to find out would be death, because they knew that if you went and saw he wasn't there in the mythology, you'd find that they weren't telling the truth. Zeus has never been there. That's the whole issue. So if you found out the truth about it, you would have to die. So mythology served its purpose in terms of controlling the individual, whether it's in religion, whether it's in politics. In politics, they use the term left and right. There's no left and right in it whatsoever. A baby that cries in Venezuela is just as hungry as one that cries here in Richmond. It needs the same kind of milk. There's no left and right in that. But these different terms are used to keep persons divided in such a way that they can be controlled by what they think. The first thing, one of the key leading words, if you read your newspaper by the columnists, in this morning's paper, I think it's one, I can't think of his name right offhand, but if you look at the writers in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, especially on the editorial page, there are 2 words, or 4 words that you see that are going to show up in columns very often: left and right, conservative and liberal. And that is done so that the individual can frame his mind in such a way as to put what he's writing and saying to you in a box. That's very important. You have to be in a box. So if I can get you into the box here that I'm talking about, then I'm able to better guide you and show you which way to go. Walter Williams, I got to stop because Walter Williams is an economist at George Mason University. He does a lot of columns in the Times-Dispatch. And one of his favorite themes is children born out of wedlock without fathers. But I'm tempted to write him a letter to find out, well, why is it that that's such a bad thing when Jesus was born out of wedlock without a father, and you haven't written about that yet? So I'm just talking about the double standard in how we get our information and how we understand it. So as I say again before, forbearance not only in our social circumstance, but in our intellectual capacity. The first thing, if anyone has watched, and I love to watch it, I never get through laughing, look at Fox News. I love it. Boy, I'll tell you. God, I love it. If those terms left and right are not used, the program is not going to be successful. And by the time they get through with that slant and get through with you, you will think that the whole United States is coming to an end. We have no money. It's looking bad out here, but no matter what the point of view might be, it's generally built from a negative. If you don't believe this, you're going to hell. You've got to do it. You've got to be saved. When you were born, you had a flaw. You were born in sin. You come in here wrong. That's the whole idea. You got to do something to be redeemed. You got to be changed. Well, if we all continue to think like that, by the time we do get ready to die, which is generally related to religion, death and religion, we feel so negative. We already are at a disadvantage. So anyway, enough of that.
All right, he'll give a personal lecture after this. So I want to jump in on a couple of points you made. First, if anybody's interested in learning about the history of doubt and doubters, Jennifer Michael Hecht has a great book called Doubt, and it will go back historically and goes through all the free thinkers, and they have been there for a long, long time. A second point I want to mention is something that you and David both addressed. With Islamism important, you're right, the beliefs really are important, whether theological or otherwise. In terms of the terrorist, we just need to be careful. You know, it's not that most of the people doing that kind of terrorism are psychopaths or crazy. Right. The belief system motivates them getting hooked in with an inspiring leader. But so Scott Atron and Andy Thompson, Sam Harris all talk about this, where these are some very well-educated people, engineers, doctors. You know, these are people that are not as disenfranchised as a lot of other people may be from, you know, U.S. policies and so forth. Yeah. So I have one general question for everybody. If people in the audience have some questions, just raise your hand so we're aware of it, and Allie can come up and grab the mic. So we do have one there. So okay, so Allie, can you come grab the mic? I'm going to start a question. Jason, can you let her have that, and we'll share here. So while we're getting ready for this, I want to know if there's anything that you guys genuinely miss from religion that you sort of wish you still had, anything that you think we should pull in from the religious experience into like atheist and humanist communities. So maybe we can start here, and once the mic is set, we'll cut away.
No, I'm laughing at you because you're looking pretty passionate with yours.
So for me, it's always been a big thing about community. Whenever someone that I talk to that did live within the religious space starts to kind of be a little more open about their questioning or just non-belief, you know, it isolates them further from the community because it's hard to maintain the front, you know what I'm saying? And the reality is that I went to church because, you know, it gave me something to do on Sundays. The church had resources. It was better than just doing nothing in the inner city. Plus they had girls there. So, you know, it was a community thing. It was, yeah, they call it fellowship, but it was for the girls, you know. But that's kind of lost because, you know, once again, I go back to that religion owning a certain space. It's almost like people got the attitude that we can get together and have talks and discuss science and do all these great things, but we can't make it look too much like the church. So we're just not going to do that, but people need that. So what are we going to do in order to kind of fill that space? You know, because we don't just want to be 9 to 5, we do this, and then on for 1 hour, maybe on a Sunday or a Tuesday or whenever, have a discussion where we get together and see things. No, we need the community to keep going forward, because it's, once again, the people that you're surrounded by that have similar thinking. It reinforces your values, and it helps you actually just be more happy in yourself. So missing that community is a huge part, you know.
I'll say one thing. I missed my free time. I used to have a lot more free time when I was a church-going guy. And I used to think that by praying I was doing a lot when I wasn't doing anything. And so now I know that I have to do something if I want something, if I want to contribute, I have to actually do something and not just sit there and pretend to be doing something.
So you missed the right to just sit there and be oblivious.
Well, I used to believe that I was doing something. Now I realize it was just all a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Candace or Mandisa?
I don't miss anything, no. No, because like you said, I mean, there's nothing that they give that I can't get outside. And I feel like I got more, my life became richer when I left. So no, not anything. We were even talking this morning at breakfast about gospel music, and I was like, yeah, man, every now and then. But then I'm like, no, but there's plenty of good music still.
And you can still enjoy gospel music. Well, you know, Mozart was all religious music.
The
and
lyrics
it's great.
get in the way, though, now.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's still lots of good music. Black women can still sing. They don't have to sing about Jesus. So, no, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't miss anything.
I'm sorry. Because I was never formally raised in a church, I mean, I was raised, like I said, in a conscious community. So, I mean, what I do miss is that level of, you know, there's a lot of culture. You know, there is a lot of that sense of unity, if you will, as it pertains to issues within the Black community. I think I may have missed some of that cohesiveness, because once you step out of that community, once you unlearn this collective idea that all white people are bad, or that we are not, that we are, yes, we have been an oppressed people. We can overcome our oppression, and that there are times when we do contribute to our oppression. Rethinking and reconsidering that can kind of make you a pariah in that community. And so that is sort of, but as far as like the social aspect, I don't feel like I was missing anything. From the outside looking in, religion in the church has always looked cliquish to me. It always seemed like it forced you to give up a part of yourself and a part of your individuality and conform. And conformity is something I don't do. So for me, it was never something that I felt like I missed. And one thing I realized is that you can build a community out of anything and anyone. Usually, if you think you're the only one that's going through something, you aren't. But it's up to you to find it, and it's up to you. You know, you can find it. It is possible to rebuild. And I think that that's something that a religious mindset can take away from people, is that, well, you're nothing. You are stuck with this for the rest of your life. And once you wake up to that, you realize that there's just so much more.
I think the thing I won't say I missed, but I'm glad of, is that I lost a great deal of prejudice and bias. Mm-hmm. That has freed me up a great deal, and it has encouraged me to be more proactive and looking for the best in the individual. I'm still critical, but at the same time, I have a greater feeling for looking for what is positive to be done, looking for the best in the person, and knowing, especially with students, that there are certain talents and abilities. Look for those things and encourage that individual to make it better. And when you see something good, you know, say something good. I like that, or, you know, and that makes, to me, that fulfills a great deal of what I didn't have really in terms of being in a kind of religious box. It narrowed my view. So meeting the person, you know, where they are, it's a hard thing to do. But by doing so, it's made me more aware of my own shortcomings, what I need to work on, but to be more appreciative of others, that everyone has something to offer. And it's up to us to look at that person if we can and see what that gift is. Some are craftsmen, and sometimes someone gives you a good word or says something to you that not only makes your day, but really makes your life. And so that, for me, is something that that's really picked up and made me feel a lot better, being able to encourage others and to see the best. see the best in others.
I'm going to exercise my moderator right and just ask a couple of questions that I'm curious about. One, Candace, I'm curious about your work in terms of how you see religion intersecting with mental health challenges in women in general and African American women specifically. And then I want to follow up with Mandisa on talking about inclusion. What do you see as some of the important barriers to inclusion within the larger secular community, and how can we address them? And specifically, I'm talking about challenges that I've seen we face personally with people that think there shouldn't be a black non-believers, and why do you need black non-believers as they belong to an atheist group, as if that's not an identity in and of itself. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
So from a mental health perspective, so of course I'm a licensed professional counselor, and oftentimes I do have it when somebody comes in to me, especially black women, but not only black women actually, but when they come in and you know they're talking about religion right off the bat, it's really hard for me to move the therapeutic process anywhere. You know, because everything comes back to a Bible scripture, everything comes back to a this, a that, a but, you know, and in my book, I talk about how I feel like one of the biggest issues with religion and how it affects mental health is that it creates a whole bunch of cognitive distortions. It creates all of these ideas about how the world exists and how it should exist and what should. And then when you get caught in that stuff, you know, when you get caught in that distorted thinking patterns, it's hard to get people out of that stuff. And that's where the depression kicks in. And that's where when you're living under this, you should live this way, or you should be this, or you should be that, and you're not, you know, and you're finding that standard hard to even achieve, to even come close to, then yeah, you're walking around, you're depressed, you're full of anxiety. And in like I said, in a therapeutic session, right, in that process in and of itself, it's like almost impossible.
But I think even that they made it that far, that you're seeing them, is a big step.
It's a big step.
I'm always afraid of the people that hear voices and they go for an exorcism instead.
Well, there's, yeah. No. It's definitely a step in the right direction. And it just tends to be a much longer process when everything comes back to, you know, it makes me think I have a guy that I work with right now, and he's got a lot going on in his life, and it's all this horrible stuff. But he doesn't even want to tell me what's going on in his life because he can't speak it into existence. If he tells me the name of his terminal illness, then he speaks it and it becomes stronger, and the devil and demons. So I don't even know what this man's terminal illness is because he cannot. I'm his therapist, and I don't know what his terminal illness is because he can't say it, or else it'll make it true. So it can be pretty nasty stuff sometimes.
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this brief. I've been involved with the secular community now for 5 years. And at Black Nonbelievers, we have we have multi-goals. We have multi-purpose goals. One of those goals is to increase the visibility within the Black community, but also to help increase the diversity within the secular community. Because even though atheism isn't just a white thing, guess who's representing it? Predominantly white folks. And so what we are facing in this community is that even though we are atheists, we have let go of religion, we have let go of the God concept, there are still other isms that many people hold on to. And that there is this tendency to push up predominantly white atheists, and as if we're supposed to just accept it. Or that that is the representation that we're just supposed to have, which can be a deterrent for a person of color or a woman to come into this community and to see that the representation is predominantly white. Now, there are, as organizers, there are many of us out here on the ground. There are many atheists who are oblivious to certain constructs as it pertains to race, as it pertains to gender, as it pertains to people who are different. They are holding on to this sense of privilege. There are many white atheists who don't understand the dynamic of the Black community, and they'll just ask the question of, well, I don't understand how how you people or how blacks can just believe in religion when it was forced on your ancestors? That is a very unfair and loaded question, especially when you don't know the history of the black community. It is important to educate yourself.
Don't come up to black people and say that, right?
Right.
Like, I don't understand how y'all believe. It's pushed on y'all. Oh,
right. And so there is this, there tends to be this, there a couple of things. There is this tendency to ask us some very, very interesting questions, as if we are able to answer everything about our community. Yeah, we don't know. I was asked one time what our organization was going to do about black on black crime. I was given a presentation about what the secular community can learn from the hospitality industry, and I'll get back to that in a second. So it was a very racist question. There is this idea that somehow we have let go of racism, we have let go of sexism because we're in the secular community, and that is not true. Again, there's still a lot of isms that people are holding on to, and that many organizers and leaders need to pay very close attention to when you are approaching a person of color that is in the movement. Also being aware of what we have accomplished. It isn't just our responsibility to bring diversity to the table. That is something that we have to work on together. And so realizing and recognizing the importance of what we do, that something that Mandisa Thomas, I may not have a big podcast. Yeah, I'm the founder it's still a very grassroots organization. Does that mean that I deserve less recognition than someone like Richard Dawkins, someone like Sam Harris? No, it does not, because what I do is just as important as what they do. We also have a tendency to highlight the literary works of people, which is important. But what the church what church and other communities has done has been able to relate to people. So they've been able to connect on this level that is just very, very basic, and it provides certain needs as just being friendly. I was impressed by the number of friendly people that was in this building that just said, hello, how are you? Do you need help? And I'm in customer service. I've been in hospitality for now 14 years. This is something that as a community we need to work on, because we cannot just tout our intellectual capabilities without being able to relate to people that may be on a different level, and recognizing that you do have a sense of privilege if you are a white man. There are things that you may not recognize or that you may not see that could be considered offensive if you are asking it of a person of color or a woman or someone in the LGBT community. Be more mindful beyond your atheism. That is where the humanism comes in. Or even if you identify as a humanist, it is not something that you hold as a badge of elitism or honor. Make sure that you are imparting those basic principles of humanism, but also being aware and understanding of certain constructs that may be considered offensive or just outright sexist or racist towards other people in the community, and that we are all important. Get to know the other side. It is not, the diversity will not happen if we only continue to push one aspect. So that is some of the, those are just some of the barriers that I've come across. Excuse me, that I've come across.
Can we go to the audience, or did you have something to chime in? Okay, and one thing just to touch on something Mandisa said, if you read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, is a wonderful book that really does talk about not just that everything comes from the top down, but the true importance of grassroots leaders, and this is really what drives our country. So again, that's a great book to read. We had a couple of questions here. Alec, can you?
Would you mind saying your name if you feel comfortable if you're asking a question?
Yeah, and this is being recorded, so if you don't want your name on it, don't say it. If you do, then you're welcome to.
Okay, my name is Phil Jones. The internet has been a game changer, and I want to see what your opinions on, has that been helpful in drawing minorities to the more reason?
It's been essential.
So it's been critical. I think the movement, the whole secular movement wouldn't be where it is today without the internet. It's a lot of, for the Hispanics, for instance, it's been really good because I know of a dozen or more people that have deconverted. You know, they have left religion because of conversations they saw two other people having. They weren't involved. They were just watching two other people having a conversation, sometimes, you know, a debate or something along those lines. And so I think the number one secularizing factor there's been in the last 20 years has been the internet. The internet is what's made it possible that when books come out to say, hey, here's the book, and you can have it in audiobook, and you can have it in an ebook, and you can have it in 10 different ways you can get to it. And you want to write an email to the author, you can write an email to the author and ask more questions and so forth. So it's brought everyone to be more inclusive and be part of the whole thing. And when having questions and issues, go in and look for it. Now, the bad part, of course, is that most people that go to the internet go there to verify what they already believe in. And so one of the things that we try to teach kids in high school is do some debates online, but take the opposite side and do the best job to try to, you know, and go against a friend or something to try to see the other side and what is their logic and, you know, and debate that way. So it's a way of inculcating critical thinking, which involves you know, empathy, involves being able to stand in somebody else's shoes and seeing things from a different angle, which is a lot to what you just said. And so without the internet, I think that would be just virtually impossible. So it's been a game changer, in my opinion.
Anyone?
What I've seen about the internet is that I can agree with everything that Candace and David has said. As an organizer who advocates for offline participation, I think while the internet has been wonderful and been great for research and information, I think at times the internet has a tendency to become a security blanket for people who are already socially awkward, that you can be what you want to be on the internet. You can sort of disguise yourself, especially when you're having debates and discussions with certain people. I always contend that it is better to look people in the eye and be face to face with folks, because in a way, I think it has made it easier for people to hide in that awkwardness to where they feel like they don't have to fix it. And therefore, some of the issues, some of the mental issues that they may have may not necessarily be addressed or fixed as a result. So, yes. So they may be encouraged in a bad way. So I think it's it's been a double-edged sword to an extent.
Yeah, I think as far as the explosion of non-belief in the
absolutely.
in the minority communities,
yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
I mean, I would
Meetup made a big difference.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
To gather, you know, getting those people.
YouTube videos made a big difference. Watching debates and stuff.
Yeah, I've had people credit my "How Religion Crippled the Black Community" video as being a single resource for them coming out as an atheist. I mean, I'm very proud of that, and I'm honored and humbled by that. But yes, absolutely. Forums like this that start off in person and then translate and are transferred online really do help a lot.
Okay. We had a couple other audience questions.
Hi, my name is Wendler Groh, and just as a little background, my father was a Protestant minister, and I accepted I was an atheist at age 16. I ran for Congress openly as an atheist in 2010. And I ran in Bible Belt, Southside Virginia. The 4th Congressional District was over 30% African American, which meant when I went to the Democratic meetings, they were majority African American. And I'm a retired physician, so I needed some guidance, and at one early meeting, there was a young black man whose mother is a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, so he knew the game. And I said, well, look, I'm an atheist and I plan to run openly. And his reaction was visceral. It was like I had punched him in the stomach. He said, no, you cannot be openly atheist and expect support from the black community. And he explained to me about the civil rights movement. The leaders were preachers, Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson. And he said, you just can't do it. Well, I did it. And later on, Lionel Spruill, who was a member of the House of Delegates from Chesapeake, African American, he went on the radio and he said, "I'm not going to hell behind no Democrat." So what I learned from all of this, there was no separation of church and state. It was one large document governs this country in their perspective, and it's divided up into the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bible. And that was the way they approached it. And so I would just like your opinion about how this all politically, how you separate it out and how you see it being separated out. And it's been a great discussion. I really appreciate it.
I guess I would ask, how many atheist candidates are there in Congress in general, even if they're majority white districts?
Maybe one.
So I guess I would wonder whether the experience with the African American community is necessarily leading us in a lot of battles online with people being accused of being atheists in districts and districts of gerrymandered, in districts that are probably predominantly white. So I wonder whether your experience was very specific to this place, or whether it's something that seems to replicate in other areas, whether they're majority black or not. I don't know.
I think that the door is a lot open than it was before, than 2010. There's progress that has been made. And a lot in part is because of this movement that we're trying. Well, one of the things we're trying to do is normalize atheism, so we no longer need to exist. If atheism was normal, it wouldn't be a big deal for anything, and we wouldn't have these organizations. But the fact is that there's a lot. The churches themselves put out a lot of misinformation. This is a Christian nation, this is, Jesus's land, et cetera, And you look at the ark that was just built for $18 million with taxpayer money. If another religion that was not Christian and Muslims were trying to build something and ask for $18 million, they would have been laughed out of. How many fights do we have because the Ten Commandments are put in public lands, or nativity scenes put in different places? There's a lot of work that is being done, one lawsuit at a time, and progress is being made. But I think in part is because the general population, especially the younger people, are starting to accept that religion, they're starting to be, I don't know if it's more apathetic about religion, or the religion doesn't play the biggest role. They become nuns. They've stopped going to church and giving money to churches. And so that has helped politicians, because politicians are not leaders, they're followers. They're following the money, they're following the votes, and they will do whatever they think the people want them to do in general, unless bigger money comes in place. Gun control comes to mind. So that's I think that a lot of progress has been made, but boy, I think we got a ways to go yet, ways to go.
So, the role of the pastor in the black community, because it has always had a high place in the community, people go to their pastors for political reasons. A lot of times pastors will tell people who to vote for. I mean, it's not just a black thing, it's a white thing too. So naturally, whenever someone comes in and their theological standpoint or their belief system is in opposition to that, you're going to get some of that friction, and that's just the reality of it. But this younger generation, I don't think they give much of a care. They're slowly coming to the understanding that I'm not going to have anyone tell me what to think or what to do. So as far as whatever you believe, I don't care what you believe, as long as you're serious about doing the work that needs to be done. And that's what the young people are about.
I'd like to add also that one of the most prevalent myths that's presented in the public is when many politicians say to us that our rights and our laws are handed down to us by God. But when we look into the legal law books, none of those laws are signed by God. I think the mythology that has to do with the idea that there's something outside or beyond us that is moving us or creating us, that's a very serious thought. But when we say that America is a land of, they talk about exceptionalism, Except who? Except the persons who benefit the most from it. Is that what that means? American exceptionalism. When we study terms like manifest destiny, I don't know if many of you all remember that from your social studies when, it's this providential idea that we've been destined to go forward to the West and to make this country what it is. And I think that some of these myths have been very strong in motivating the country to be developed. But at the same time, when we start to look at the practical means by which we do that, then that's where the politics comes in to decide who's going to get what, how much, and to what degree. It was my understanding, just in some of the reading, as far as the 40 acres on a mule, you all have probably heard about that. General Sherman, I think it was, that was one of the ones that supported that idea that that after the Civil War, that perhaps the slaves or blacks could be given a certain amount of land and a mule, and I forget, 40 acres. But the underlying objection was that, well, hell, if they've been working all this time for us for nothing, if we give them 40 acres and a mule, we'll be working for them. So you see, a lot of the intellectual thought about what is taking place, this is not an accident. It's not a coincidence that the country has come to be what it is. And I think now that with the young people coming along, the millennials, looking at things in a broader sense, I think we're beginning to understand how some of these myths have come about. We were discussing last night the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, just the first couple of lines that we talked about a little bit last night. And it states, it's a paradox, and Jefferson wanted to be remembered for this statute, the Declaration of Independence, and the founding of the University of Virginia. He despised where he'd been married. But the point I want to make is that it begins, whereas Almighty God hath created the mind free. That's very interesting that he would say that. But why do you think it is he didn't say, whereas Almighty God hath created the mind and body free? It would have never passed. Because it was that idea in his mind that there are certain bodies had to be owned, and this was a divine right to do that. It was in God's domain that the black man be owned by the white man. So he could very well say, whereas Almighty God had created the mind and body free. No, that belonged to others. Patrick Henry, when he talked about give him liberty or give him death, there was no consideration for the persons that he owned up in Hanover County. So what I'm saying is, it's all how we think about this, and it's a good thing. And I'm very happy that Donald Trump is running for president. And I'll tell you what, I'll stop. The reason I'm happy is because we get every day an opportunity to explode a myth, to show how untruth and how things that are negative have held the country back for so long, how they're backward thinking. But he is smart enough to realize that there are enough ignorant people remaining in our country who can be manipulated, just like he is by Putin, to make things change. And I'm just hoping that persons will open their eyes and understand how their religious beliefs, whether it's manifest destiny, does it make a difference that Hillary Clinton is a Methodist? Does it make a difference? What anybody believes in is what they do. And I'd always been taught that what persons do is what they believe. People can tell you anything they want to, but what they do is actually what they believe. That's only my opinion.
I have just one thing to ask. Was your campaign successful?
No, this is 2010.
Right.
Just about every Democrat lost.
Okay, so I don't think it would have been too much of a stretch to actually try to have appealed or at least unveiled yourself to the black community at that time, even whether it would have been successful or not. See, the thing that we have to remember is that for us, it is still very difficult to openly identify, but we do it because it's important. We cannot be afraid of what people may perceive, because there are in engaging other African Americans in the black community, I've found that there have been people who have just simply, they don't have enough information about what an atheist is or what a non-believer is, because they've been conditioned to either not think about it or not do any research. So when you unveil yourself or when you open yourself to actually being asked good questions as well. So I think that the person gave you bad advice Because, I think there should have been an attempt and an effort to try anyway, because I'll tell you something, in the black community, there is a perception that white folks don't want to be bothered, and so they won't do it anyway. And you have to challenge that perception, even as an atheist. You have to be able to be willing to have that discussion. And even if some of us will be willing to and reach out to now, you have the ability to reach out to our organizations and to us to help with that process. But at least, you know, trying it and breaking in, reaching across that line there may have helped.
Well, I did. I was running against Randy Forbes, the founder and chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus. And he refused to debate me, he refused to be seen with me. There was a headline in the Virginian Pilot, it was written up, and the headline was on the front page, "In God Only One Trusts," and it was about the race between the two of us. But so many other people were afraid of the topic. Fox News wouldn't touch it because that would give me publicity. My own party wouldn't touch it because they didn't want to be said, well, you know, you put one of those people in, one of those atheists, they're all going to take over.
They're learning that lesson now. They learned that lesson now with Bernie Sanders.
Everybody was afraid of it. Thank you.
Well, for your next run, now you really do have some people to connect with that can maybe bring you in. Ali, I think there was one question.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, one last thing on that, and just a quote that I think is very important that most people don't know, and is that the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli that says the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And John Adams, very good, number 2 president of the United States. So he knew what he was talking about when he said that because he's one of the signers of the Constitution.
My name is Steve Fox. I just have a simple numbers question regarding the religious membership profile of Black Americans. How has it changed? I know in the late 60s, many joined the Muslim religion, but how has it changed more recently, and what direction is it going in? Is it pretty much mirroring the total American, becoming less religious, and just wondering how it breaks down?
So I actually have a slide. I do a presentation whenever I train chaplains to actually talk about this very thing, and the reality is blacks tend to be a lot more religious than non-blacks. And I say that because even in you talk about the overall grouping of minorities, and, you know, you throw in basically every race, blacks still, out of those groups, seem to be the most religious. And the statistics prove that. I actually can send some of that to you all if you give me some emails or something like that. So we're fighting against that. You know, that's the reality, and that's the perception, that's the expectation. But I think there's a difference between being religious, being a part of a faith group, and actually still believing, you know, because a lot of times that affiliation is because we choose to remain a part of a group, even though we may not necessarily confine ourselves to all of the thinking of that group.
They said a good politician is one that answers a question that was not asked. I'll answer the same questions for the Hispanics. In the last 10 years, over 200,000 Hispanics have converted to Islam. So that goes to show you that Islam is a growing religion, not just in the African American community, but also in the Hispanic community. And it's done the same way every other religion gets people to join. Free babysitting services, free English classes, those kinds of things. And people feel that they need to be more grateful, and they start attending services, and before you know it, they have the religion virus.
I can say I'm sorry, the research and stuff that I read, I haven't seen a whole lot of shift in real numbers just yet. Anecdotally, though, it's coming soon. Like, one day Pew is going to come out and it's going to be like, wait, when did black people drop to 50% or something? But I think it's happening. Like you said, either people don't say it out loud, or we're just the ones that don't get the phone call from the polling. I don't know. I think it's shifting. We just don't have the actual real data to show it yet.
Just before the question, just one short. To me, coming along in the 60s, being a teenager during that time and thinking about this whole idea of integration, I remember when the signs were on the water fountains, as some of you do. And one of the things that really, I think, is a myth in terms of desegregation or whatever you want to call it, integration. All black people are not in favor of that. Many in my community did not want integration, but what we did want was for our science labs to be updated. We wanted new textbooks, and we wanted new buildings. We didn't want to go in with whites because we had substantial teachers, even though they were working for half the pay, or 75% of the pay of the white teachers. We didn't think we needed that. And what happened was we were afraid that we would lose control of our schools, and we did. And the point I'm making here is it never had been, it had always been a myth with many of us in our community that because we sat beside a white kid that we get smarter. Had nothing to do with it. We simply wanted to have our schools, and this is on the point of blacks and how they may think. We weren't all in favor of Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. We just wanted to make things better. We weren't all that church going and all that believing, but we wanted to make things better. So I think on your point, I think you're very right. I think that there's a reluctance maybe to admit that, you know, perhaps, well, maybe we're not as religious as we would purport to be, but there's a strong group dynamic in terms of being cohesive with family and social. Is the social pressure, I think, on an individual to say, you know, I really don't go for that Jesus thing. That's a hard thing to deal with and come back and deal with family. But I do want to just emphasize one more thing. That myth about this whole idea of integration and the civil rights movement, and we were behind Martin. We respect Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But many of us did not want integration because we had our own great teachers. We just wanted to have improved facilities and bring things to a level of where we can say, okay, now we're ready.
And I'll be the one to say it, but with all of the foolishness going on, there's a small contingent of us who would almost say, can we reintegrate this thing? Because I feel a little bit safer over here. Like, just like you said, give me equal resources or whatever, but good, like, because it's dangerous out there, you know? There's a whole lot of like old school, like how successful was desegregation? Exactly. I guess is what I'm saying. The question is, how successful was that?
Yeah, another book to add to your reading list by Jonathan Kozol is called Apartheid Schooling in America, which I think some of our family actually listened to together. And it's really disturbing, you know, if you think that people have roughly equal resources, you need to listen or read that book and you'll be really disturbed. Are there some more questions out here that we've missed?
First of all, my name is Hypatia, and more than a question, I have a comment. And I want to read a definition here of something that I've been told that I am many times. Militant, combative, and aggressive in support of a political or social cause, and typically favoring extreme, violent, or confrontational methods. I don't remember ever hitting anybody. I don't remember ever being physically aggressive to anybody. And sometimes, you know, I feel that people need to grow a little bit of thicker skin because we have to come to terms that we have some issues in this country in our country that we don't like to address. We're a racist country. And until we accept that and we work in becoming less racist, we're never going to solve the issue. We're a sexist country, and until we solve and work on that, we're not going to find any solutions. So rather than sweeping everything under the rug, it would be nice sometimes to have people say, maybe she's not militant, maybe there is something. I don't agree, you know, maybe with the deliverance of the message, maybe there's something to it, you know, and once that is established, maybe we can move on and work on solving some issues. The other thing that, the other comment that I have to make is about the Hispanic community. It is good and fine and great to excuse every self-victimization that people want to do, but you know, how many Hispanics are in this room? 2? Okay, where is the rest? So you are going to tell me that no Hispanics had the time or is capable of joining these sort of events and working on some of the issues again? I mean, you know, we have to be accountable for our shortcomings. And if we don't want to do that, then we need to shut up. Because, you know, saying that, you know, I'm sick and tired of being a rapist, a drug dealer, a criminal. But I'm not going to be militant about it. I'm just going to go vote in November or do something to help people vote. But I can't blame the idiots for all my issues. I have to be accountable and try to address them at my level, even if that is in a small way. And sometimes I think the atheist community, you know, we suffer from what other communities and other groups suffer in the same way. You know, we tend to be very critical of people. For example, I've heard a lot of the time, well, you know, Dawkins and Harris are militant. Well, I'm telling you, if somebody doesn't take the initiative and is willing to take the bullets at the beginning, none of us would be here. So, you know, rather than criticize them, it would be kind of better, in my opinion, to say, well, you know what? They did their time, they took the bullet, now we're moving into something else. But to dismiss them and to try to pretend that they never existed is not a good thing either. And that is something that happens within the atheist community. And the other thing that I notice is sometimes among ourselves we say, well, you know, he or she's okay because she's an atheist. I am not defined by being an atheist. I'm an atheist and many other things. So I don't want people to say, well, you know, she's not good because she's an atheist, or she's good because she's an atheist. I'm good because of many things, and because I'm an atheist, and vice versa. So, you know, those are comments that I think that we as a community, we need to work on, rather than, you know, blame everyone else for our problems. We need to be accountable and take initiative in solving our own issues. And, you know, whether we are the Hispanic community or the Black community or whatever, you know, but I think that right now I'm very angry because I see no Hispanics here, and I can't believe that there are no atheist Hispanics in Richmond.
Well, thank you. Those are some great points. We're just about out of time. What I'd like to do is maybe Tiffany can ask one last question, and then we can give each panelist, if there's something that we didn't bring up that you want to talk about for just a minute or two, and then we'll wrap it up.
We'd like to ask the panelists in 30 seconds or less, can you tell us the one thing that you would do to make the atheist community more inclusive and welcoming for people of color? And what people here can do to make the secular community more inclusive and welcoming for people of color?
So to give everybody else time to think about that, I'll go first. I'll be the sacrificial lamb. Now, I think we're already doing it in the fact that we formed these groups you know, but that's the second part of the question I think is more interesting. I do get a lot of times that people ask me, hey, what can I do to help out? And what I say is, you know, bring up the conversation. Don't shy away from it. Invite Hispanics or minorities to your events. Make it welcoming in that sense, you know, for the Latinos, for instance, saying bienvenido, you know, just looking up the word for welcome and putting it in there. Even if no one else speaks Spanish, most Hispanics speak English anyway. And so the idea is to have them feel welcome. I had one person ask me that question in Orlando, Florida, from the American Humanist organization, and he said, what can I do to help get a Hispanic American free thinker chapter started here in Orlando? And he says, I don't speak Spanish, I don't know much about the culture, you know, I don't want to insult anybody. And I said, just set up a meetup and wait for people to show up. And no one's going to show up for a couple of months, but then eventually they'll start showing up. And you know what? They're not going to care that you're not Hispanic. They're not going to care that you don't speak Spanish. And sure enough, and so now there's a good, you know, he did exactly that. It worked out okay. And now there's about 30 people, 30 members in that group in Orlando, Florida. So it's really they invite and bring over and don't be afraid of the conversation and ask, hey, did I say something wrong? Or, you know, and for us to let them know, hey, that's not how you refer to, I mean, like I do with my older, you know, parents, you know, educating them on what was okay 30 years ago, I mean, it's not okay today.
I think it's important to reach out. I just wanted to follow up. I am from the celebrate, and I think it's important to give publicity to what people are doing. And after the nightclub massacre in Orlando, there were a number of human celebrants that were performing funerals for free, just the cost of them getting down to Orlando. And a lot of them had to be bilingual, so we're going in. A lot of LGBT people are not religious, even if they are not atheists. A lot of them are non-religious to very we're standing ready to perform some of the funerals for the 9/11 victims. So I think that's one important way that we can reach out, building on what you just said.
One important thing is to support the organizations, support Black non-believers, support Hispanic American freethinkers, support your local humanist, atheist, and secular groups. The same way the religious institutions lend their support, especially financially, is the same way we need your support. None of us here are trying to get rich or buy Benzes, or I know I'm not. Maybe David is. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, in order for our organizations to grow, we need support and participation. And you don't have to be Black to support Black non-believers.
And we are 501c3.
We are 501c3 organizations, so donations are tax deductible. And recognize and also understand that outreach is important, and not just to atheist or secular events. Think outside of the box as to where you might be able to grow your presence. There are plenty of events and other festivities out there in different cities. You might be able to just set up a table. Something as simple as an Ask an Atheist or Humanist table might make a huge difference and encourage participation as well as coalition building and collaborative efforts. It may seem simple and or it may not, you know, it's relatively simple, but it takes dedicated people. Stay dedicated to your organizations as well. To be in this long haul and to be an organizer can be very, very tough, and it can be tiring and taxing, but it's important to continue to stay with it.
I would echo everything Mandisa said also. The reality is, you know, folks want to be met wherever their need is. So kind of like the church, you know, how it always says it does, it goes in and meets the need. That's the same thing that we need, you know, atheists, humanists, free thinkers to do, because until you actually, you know, hit the streets or just, you know, actually hit the pavement, you're not really doing much, you're just talking. And too often words have been used to open up wounds and just perpetuate systems that have kept people down and eventually made them turn away completely. So in order for that not to happen, you actually have to do that stuff. And in addition to that, you got to incorporate, especially Blackness. It can't be some side thing. You can't just be an ally of something. You know, when you say it's an ally, it's almost like saying, but I'm not really with you, but it's like, hey, I acknowledge you got something going on that is your own thing. Don't do that. Actually incorporate all of this stuff in every single aspect of whatever your movement is, because that's how it proves that you're actually authentic, okay? And in order for Black folks especially to buy into your stuff, you had better bring that, or else it's just not going to work.
I think as a young lady is publishing, writing, I think being more aggressive about getting published and putting the ideas out there, and where possible to work with young persons and encourage them, not in an effort to steer their thinking, but to challenge them in such a way that they begin to examine the structure of their thinking too. And that can be informally, and I don't think you have to go up and say, hey, you know, I'm an atheist, I'm trying to get you to think right. That's not what it's all about. It's by being able to encourage and say, listen, you got a good idea here, encouraging the best. I think in publishing and writing, and where possible, I think reaching out to other groups. I know I'm not a part of some of the other groups I know that are here in Richmond, and I'm considering doing that. I'm basically a full-time substitute teacher, but at the same time, I need to be a part of other organizations. So to make it short, reach out to other organizations and broaden your appeal.
I think in terms of just being relatable, or like what language do I use, or how do I, you know, how to connect, period. This will sound funny. You need a Black person or a Latino person or LGBT person or whatever. You need one of them in your inner circle. You know, like if we can go out.
But not just as a token.
Not just as a, no. And I'm talking about personal. Yeah. I'm talking about my friends. You know what I'm saying? Like my real life friends, my real life not Facebook friends. You know, you can go out and you can live your whole life every single day and never see a Black person, right? you need one in your network. You know what I'm saying? You need a good, close black friend that you can go, yo, okay, we thinking about doing this. What's it gonna look like if I say X, Y, Z? You know what I'm saying? If I want to put on an event for some Latino people, I'm not gonna say, I'm gonna go to somebody that I know and that I trust, and hopefully I've got somebody in my personal network. So my counselor, the counselor in me says, people, connections, know people, like get to know somebody and have somebody that's a real, like you said, not an ally, not a Facebook friend. You can send any of us on the stage a question, but not even us. You know, what your coworker that you sit beside right now every single day, like how much do you know about her or him as a black person or whatever, you know, somebody that you can actually go to directly and say, we need some guidance here, what's up? Not a token, an actual person in your circle.
That doesn't agree with everything you say.
That doesn't agree.
Right.
Not when you say, oh, all lives matter, and you say, we're not in agreement.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's going to be honest with you and real with you about what they're saying.
I mean, somebody that you can invite to your house. That's what I mean when I'm saying circle. I mean, like, hey, come over, let's have a bottle of wine and chill. Oh, by the way, I want, like...
All right, I'll come over.
Yeah, come on, man.
All right, so I think it's going to be the last thing. If we can just take, if each of you want a minute or so, if there's some stuff that we didn't talk about that's important that we just missed, you know, bring it up so we can at least all think about it. And then if people have questions, you're welcome to come up afterward. If you're able to support, you know, we have some books, we have some stuff from Black Nonbelievers. So please come, and even if you can't support that with money right now, come up and say hello and just introduce yourself. So Candace, why don't we start with you?
The only thing I would say is another area that I'm interested in is sort of sexual revolution, especially with black women, seeing that we sort of have these two extremes. We're either like this hypersexual hoe, or we're like a prude, or, you know, something. Bodies to be abused and taken advantage of. And when a black woman then reclaims her body and decides that she is a sexual being who's going to own that thing, well, then, you know, then you get these other horrible labels like hoes and stuff like that. So I think in the free thought movement, in the atheist movement, in the humanist movement, I'm enjoying watching this sort of sexual revolution that I'm noticing a lot of black women are going through right now. So that's sort of a new area of interest for me.
Okay. So I'm a talker, I could do this all day long. But one thing that I didn't mention, I want to mention now, and it may be related to the last question, is what can you do? Especially with young people, I'd recommend that you buy them a book, you know, a short, small book, so they can put in their pocket and read it. There are two books and a video that I highly, highly, highly recommend. Did I say highly? The first one is an old one, but good one, is The Demon Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark by Carl Sagan. Outstanding book. It was written, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. It's still very good. The other one is by a mutual acquaintance of ours, Why We Believe in Gods. And it's a little bit more cerebral, but it's for a high school student kind of level. It really explains from a scientific point of view how our religions passed on. You know, it talks about how they formed and how they're really explained by science. And then finally, a video which can be downloaded and burned onto a DVD or whatever. It's called Here Be Dragons, and it's an introduction to critical thinking. It's also an old, it's been around for about 10 years, but it's a great video called Here Be Dragons.
Thank you.
Okay, and an area that I've heard reaching out to young people, and so, which is extremely important. One thing I have come across in my activism is some older black nonbelievers who they decided at an early age that they didn't believe, but they didn't have that support. And so they found our organization and was able to find that camaraderie. And so I think it's important not to forget that, you know, you're never too old to learn or we don't want to forget about any specific age or generation and just write them off as being, just being too old, or that, or being dismissed, because again, that speaks to the level of diversity in the community that somehow they can't get it, and they have. And also another area of importance for me is self-care. Personal and self-care is important. We speak about doing so much for others, but what do we do to help enrich and develop ourselves? And I think that, when was the last time you took a vacation? When was the last time you did something fun for yourself that did not involve always having to do something for other people? Sometimes we sacrifice ourselves for this movement, for this community, and for other people. And you have to ask yourself, well, where is that care for me and myself? And unfortunately, I think a religious mindset has, it tends to condition you to sacrifice yourself to the point where, you don't deserve anything for yourself. And I don't think that's true. So personal care and self-care and being able to find that balance in our lives that has been taken away from us is very important. And we tend to focus on that as an organization as well, that the education and information side is important, but also being able to rejuvenate, being able to communicate socially and redevelop yourself and relationships is good too.
Well, I just want to reiterate the same as pretty much others on the panel, but being dedicated really to leading others, especially young people, and encouraging those and getting more involved. That's what I extend, like she said, she's probably putting in a group, extend, be another part, a broader part of the community and contribute.
For me, I guess one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and I also look at some of how religion has created stratification within the black community, specifically in regards to men's rights, and how it has changed the way the black man has been looked at, but also the way that others engage black men in the community, and that's kind of where my interests lie right now. And I think that being a non-believer, being an atheist, humanist, whatever it is, just non-religious type, we need that support, because the damage that has been done specifically to black men by religion is something that we absolutely have to put an end to.
I think we've had a really rich day. Let's give a hand to our panelists.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please come and chat with our panelists. We have some great merchandise for sale from Black non-believers. If you're here, you believe in supporting our communities, please support Black non-believers. Please also support Candace and her Ebony Exodus project. There's a book down there as well. And I don't know if David has brought anything with him.
Just my beautiful self. Humble, beautiful self.
See what his organization has to offer at his website.
Halffree.org.
Yes. And with that, we're going to end the session today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.